Welcome, friends, to this Tuesday edition of Take Five, our midweek reflection on the Scriptures. And the passage we're looking at today is the one that's actually in our reflection guide for tomorrow, but I read a couple days ahead, and this one really gripped me. And if I had to title this, I'd call it Paul's Travels. He starts out in Ephesus, a city in what was then called the province of Asia, is now Turkey. He goes across the Aegean Sea to Macedonia, the northern part of Greece, where he'd established some churches there. Philippi, Thessalonica are there, and then down south to Greece proper. And in this Tixi, he stays in Greece about 3 months, and then he comes back again and meets up with some friends in Troas, which is on the coast back in Turkey, in Asia Minor there, and he stays there 7 days. And one of those days, the last day, it said he knew his time was short, and so he spoke all night to this group of disciples. And there's one line there where it says, as Paul talked on and on, in other words, he was really long and boring, and a fellow named Eutychus, who's sitting in the window, it's up on the third floor, he fell asleep, fell out the window and died. Which I think just goes to prove that, yes, it is possible for a preacher to literally bore somebody to death. Fortunately for him, though, for Eutychus, the preacher in question, Paul, came down, and through him he was raised from the dead. And then he kept on speaking all through the night. My guess is nobody else dared to fall asleep because they didn't want anything bad to happen to him. Well, in any event, then they leave the next day. They come down along the coast to a place called Miletus, which is about 50 miles on the coast inland from the big city of Ephesus. Paul had been in Ephesus. That's where he started. He'd been there for 3 years. He knew the people there well. So he called for the elders, sent for them to come to visit with him so he could give them a final charge, the elders from Ephesus. And so they came, probably took him a couple days to get there. And when you hear that about the elders that he sent for, probably not like the elder board at a church like ours, but each of these is more probably like the pastor of a house church in Ephesus. Well, anyway, that's the movement of what's happening in the passage, and what are some things that we can glean, can take away from this? Well, one thing I think we see here is just the real cosmopolitan character of the early church. I mean, Paul is going to people in places where they spoke different local languages, had different culture, different ethnicities. And even though Roman rule had made this travel possible and safe for him, still, he had to communicate to a lot of different kinds of people in different ways. Which I guess also shows that here, 25 years after Jesus has left the earth, that the gospel is now all over the Roman Empire, largely through this man Paul. Another takeaway we see here is something to do with leadership, the importance of regularly encouraging and challenging leaders. I'm thinking of Paul sending for these Ephesian elders, and here's part of the charge that he gave to them. He says, "Keep watch over yourselves and all the flock over which the Holy Spirit has made you overseers. Be shepherds of the church of God, which he bought with his own blood." And boy, there's a lot I could say about that, but that's an orienting line I often come back to for myself as a pastor, and I've shared this with our elders at various occasions as well and fleshed it out. But I guess for me, the big takeaway here that I feel God is really impressing upon me is both Paul's sense of a destination, a goal he has in mind. He's trying to get to Jerusalem, and yet he's also very conscious of the journey and doing what God calls him to do while he's on the way there. Even back in chapter 19, when he's in Ephesus, Paul says he wants to go to Jerusalem. And if you think about that, think about Ephesus being like say this button on my shirt here. If you're looking at a map from where you're seeing it, Jerusalem, where he wants to go, is this way, about 500 miles across the Mediterranean Sea. And so in chapter 20, it starts out, he says, "So we set off on our journey through Macedonia." Macedonia is this way, a couple hundred miles, and then down to Greece, and then he comes back around like this, and then finally from here again, goes off on his way to Jerusalem. Probably it took him about 5 months just to do this little part here. It'd be kind of like if I were saying, I think God's calling me to go from here in Grove City to go to Miami, Florida. And so I'm going to head off for Miami by way of Minneapolis and Seattle. why does Paul do this? Why does he take this big circuitous route? Well, we don't really know. He doesn't say, but I think we can infer that it's because Paul wanted to check up and see, these are churches that he founded. These are people that he knew. He wanted to go back and encourage them and see how they were doing. That was something that was important to him as well to be doing, to encourage the believers in those places. And I guess to me, this is a good reminder, and maybe for some of you too, that I'm often very destination oriented. I started out today. I have this major project I knew I wanted to really zone in on, and so far I've focused on it a little bit, but really I've been doing a lot of other kind of unrelated tasks and unrelated conversations, but that all have a good bit to do with what God has also called me to be about. Or I think about the goal, the destination of helping us get back to meeting live again on weekends for worship, for Sunday school, for some of our traditional programs. I really am focused on that, and I want to help us to get there. And yet these past couple of months have been much more about the journey, and also about saying, okay, how can we be about being and making disciples along the way? And I suppose that what we're doing now, me offering this reflection on Acts 20 and you listening and seeing it through a screen is all part of that journey. What about you? What is a destination, a goal that you really do believe that God has called you to be pursuing? And then while you're on your way there, on the journey, how can you be part of really being a disciple and learning what God has for you along the way, knowing that the way toward the goal might not even be a very direct route? Well, thanks much, and I hope to be able to see you more personally soon.